Have you noticed how some people count down to Christmas parties while others simply hope the season passes quickly? Christmas gatherings seem universal, yet there is a quiet group who feel out of place, overwhelmed, or even suffocated by these events. Psychology explains that they don't hate the celebration itself, but what it represents: exposure, comparison, forced interaction, and the pressure to perform happiness. That discomfort is far more common than people admit, and it may even reveal something about you. For many, this aversion begins in childhood. Psychologists call this associative emotional memory. Children who experience tense holidays, family conflict, absence of affection, or social embarrassment learn to associate celebration with discomfort. So in adulthood, Christmas gatherings trigger implicit memories even when the emotion no longer seems logical. It isn't Christmas that hurts, it's what Christmas reminds them of. Others avoid Christmas parties for a different reason. They sense the emotional theater. This is known as cognitive dissonance. They feel the contrast between staged joy and unspoken reality. For these individuals, gatherings become performances, and being part of them feels inauthentic. Psychology suggests that people with high sensitivity to authenticity often reject environments where emotions are performed rather than lived, and Christmas is the peak of that performative expectation. Then there are social anxiety profiles. While most see celebration, they feel emotional threat, forced conversation, silent judgment, pressure to react, and the fear of being evaluated. Psychologists describe this as hyper self-awareness, a state where a person watches themselves interacting, creating exhaustion. To them, parties are not enjoyment. They are performance arenas where identity feels exposed. Another overlooked profile is the functional introvert. They are not insecure nor traumatized, they simply do not resonate with group dynamics. Psychology calls this intrinsic social mismatch. They value depth, quiet presence, and meaningful connection. For them, Christmas gatherings feel too loud, too shallow, too overstimulating. Their discomfort isn't hostility, it's incompatibility. There is also silent comparison. Festive environments amplify achievements, relationships, belonging, and status. For those who feel lacking in any of these areas, Christmas becomes a subtle showcase of inadequacy. Psychologists refer to this as activation of negative self-schemas, moments when the social atmosphere reinforces internal beliefs of not enough. Avoiding parties becomes a form of psychological self-protection. Some dislike Christmas because they never experienced genuine connection in it. Attachment theory shows that people who never felt included tend to experience celebration as alienation. The world rejoices, but they don't feel part of it. So they reject the occasion before the occasion rejects them. I hate Christmas becomes a shield, not a preference. But sometimes refusal is less about hurt and more about clarity. For some, Christmas highlights consumerism, obligation, and performative joy. Psychology calls this values dissonance. When ritual doesn't align with meaning, the mind detaches. These individuals feel more authentic celebrating quietly, in small gestures, private warmth, or symbolic reflection rather than under artificial lights. Here's something rarely said. Many who hate Christmas parties actually have deeper ways of experiencing affection. They value intentionality over spectacle, intimacy over attention, and sincerity over noise. For them, connection is meaningful when it is private and unforced. Christmas loses its magic when it becomes performance rather than presence. There is also emotional fatigue. Psychologists note that people often mislabeled as antisocial may simply have low emotional bandwidth. Christmas gatherings drain them because the environment demands responsibility, expression, and adaptation. Their avoidance is not rejection, it is self-regulation. Understanding this shifts judgment to compassion. Another layer worth exploring is emotional identity. People who dislike group celebration often show strong internal worlds: rich thinking, intense sensitivity, and quiet intelligence. Crowded environments flatten their depth. They are not withdrawing from joy, but from fragmentation of themselves. They would rather feel deeply in silence than shallowly in noise. Christmas exposes this tension, belonging versus authenticity. So now reflect. When you avoid Christmas parties, are you protecting unresolved memories, resisting performance, guarding emotional energy, or simply choosing a different syntax for joy?
There is also the question of emotional safety. Psychology explains that some minds thrive when they can observe, not when they must perform. For these individuals, parties feel like stages, and every gesture feels evaluated. They are not uncomfortable with connection, they are uncomfortable with conditions. Silent gatherings, one-on-one conversations, or small rituals feel sincere. Christmas parties feel like overriding their emotional boundaries, which triggers withdrawal as a defense rather than rejection. We must also consider cultural programming. Many grew up in environments where celebration was transactional, affection was conditional, performances were expected, and presence was demanded rather than invited. So Christmas parties don't represent warmth, but pressure. The psychology behind this is known as emotional dissonance, when what appears joyful externally activates stress internally. They're not rejecting joy. They're rejecting environments that once hurt them disguised as celebration. Then there is an existential layer. Christmas symbolizes endings, achievements, belonging, and reflection. For some, the lack of these things becomes painful. The party becomes a reminder of what is absent: connection, success, intimacy, or place. Psychologists call this symbolic confrontation, when rituals expose internal realities. Avoidance becomes a way of staying unseen by reminders of what they still don't feel secure in. Finally, there is something profoundly human here. People who avoid Christmas parties often crave connection more deeply than those who attend them, but they crave it on different terms: authenticity, choice, presence, gentleness. They long for spaces where they don't have to perform joy to be allowed to feel joy. This is why many of them love small cups of quietness, intimate conversation, shared meaning, silent laughter, where connection is earned, not displayed. Perhaps they don't hate Christmas, they just don't recognize themselves in the way the world wants them to celebrate. So now reflect. When you avoid Christmas parties, are you protecting unresolved memories, resisting performance, guarding emotional energy, or simply choosing a different syntax for joy? Psychology suggests that the reason you dislike celebration reveals far more about your emotional architecture than the holiday itself. Tell me in the comments, which of these truths feels like yours, and what does it say about how you belong in the world?